Hi, 5th grade. Today we're going to be doing multiplying fractions. This lesson isn't officially in our Eureka Math books, but we're going to be trying this out just so you can see the basic way of how to multiply fractions. And then later on in Eureka Math, in our Learn and Succeed books, we'll be doing lessons that take this to the next level. So we're going to be getting started with our lesson notes right here. So we're going to be doing a total of 6 problems together, and then you'll be doing the 4 you try problems on the back on your own. So we're going to be starting off with this problem right here. And when we are multiplying fractions, it is pretty simple. Actually, I think it's a lot easier than adding and subtracting fractions because all you have to do is you just have to go straight across and multiply by the number that's on the other side, and then that creates your new fraction. So we don't have to worry about creating equivalent fractions, we don't have to worry about finding the LCM or anything like that. We just need to multiply, and then the only real issue we might have is we may need to make mixed numbers because we may get an improper fraction, or we may need to simplify. But other than that, that is it. So we're going to take a look at this first problem. We have a half times 3/4. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with our numerator. So we're just going to take a look at this 1 and this 3 right here. And all we're going to do is we're going to kind of read this like it was just a regular math problem. We can see 1 times 3, and we know that 1 times 3 is 3. And that's all I have to do. Then my denominator, I know we're usually used to creating a denominator that is the same, but when we're multiplying, that actually doesn't matter. We don't have to find a common denominator. All we have to do is just same thing. Pretend this is just a multiplication problem, 2 times 4, and just multiply and get our answer. So 2 times 4 is 8, and then 3/8 is our final answer to this problem. So very simple. You just take this number over here, multiply it by the number directly across, so multiply numerator by the numerator, denominator by the denominator, and then check your answer to see if it needs to be simplified. So when I think about the multiples of 3, that would just be 1 and 3. And I look at then the number 8, and then can I divide 8 by 3? I cannot divide 8 by 3, so that shows me then that this is a simplified fraction, 3/8. It's not improper, so this is our final answer for this problem. Now for our next problem, we have 4/3 times 6/7. And you'll see that I now am multiplying an improper fraction by a proper fraction. And even though I have an improper fraction, I can still just go straight across and multiply. So we're going to do 4 times 6. 4 times 6 is 24. And 3 times 7 is 21. Now my answer is an improper fraction, and we remember that we don't really like that. So we have a couple of ways that we can rewrite this then as a mixed number. So we can do the strategy that we learned back in Module 3, where I create this addition problem, create a whole number, and get my answer like that. So I could have 21 21s plus 3 21s, which gives me 1 whole and 3 21st. So I could write my answer out like this by creating that whole number out of my denominator and then adding the remainder onto that. Or I could also do a standard algorithm because remember we can look at fractions as division problems. So I can look at this as 24 divided by 21. So we'll have 24 divided by 21. Remember, order really matters when you're doing these standard algorithms. I think about my steps for division. So I first start by dividing. How many times could 21 fit into 24? Well, I can fit into it once. Then I need to multiply. So I do 21 times 1, which gives me 21. Then I do my subtraction step. So 24 minus 21, which gives me 3. I would bring down if I had anything else to bring down, but I don't. And then I write my answer as a mixed number. So 3 is my remainder, so that becomes my numerator. And then 21 stays my denominator. And again, I have 1 and 3 21st as my final answer. So again, just because we have an improper fraction when we start does not really change anything. We then just do the same steps that we have been used to, where we take this improper fraction and make it into a mixed number. So let's go ahead and erase these first 2 problems and take a look at this next one. So for this next problem, we have 1 times 1/8. So 1 times 1/8. Now, you might look at this problem and feel a little bit confused because all you have is a whole number right here, and you might be confused on what you actually need to multiply. Well, when I look at this problem, I can also look at this as I have one copy or one group of 1/8. And if I just have one copy or one group of something, that means I just have one of this. So that means I have one copy of 1/8, and that would make my answer just 1/8. But if you want to see how the math works behind that, what I would do is technically all whole numbers have an invisible number 1 underneath them. So if it helps you, you can also think of any whole numbers as if having that invisible number 1, because that's like saying 1 divided by 1 is 1. Or if I had 8 over 1, or if I had the whole number 8, that 8 technically has an invisible number 1 over it, because 8 divided by 1 is still just 8. So if it helps you, you can rewrite your problem like that, and then you can just multiply straight across like we've been doing. So 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 8 is 8. And again, that gives us our final answer of 1/8. So remember, all whole numbers technically have a number 1 underneath them. So the 6 has an invisible number 1 under it. The 7 has an invisible number 1, even the number 100 would technically have an invisible number 1 underneath it. We just don't always write it with that because we don't need it there. Sometimes. All right, let's move on to our next problem. So for our next problem, we're going to be multiplying something a little bit trickier. So we have 1 1/4 times 1/3. Now for this problem, this is going to be kind of similar to when we were adding and subtracting fractions. What I want to do is I want to change this mixed number into an improper fraction just because this makes this step a lot easier for me. So what I'm going to do is, remember, I have two different ways I can look at this. If I have one whole, I can think about, well, my denominator is 4, right? So if I have a whole number, then I would have 4/4 plus whatever my remainder is, so that would be 1/4. So 4/4 plus 1/4 equals 5/4. Or I could also do this in my head by doing 1 times 4, which is 4, and then add the numerator. So 4 plus 1 is 5, and then I keep my denominator the same. Either way, we get 5/4 as our answer, and now we can multiply it by 1/3. And this is just like problem 2 when we had that improper fraction. We multiply it by a proper fraction. Our answer will probably be, oh, actually no, our answer is actually going to be fine. So we're not even going to have to worry about changing it back. So we're going to have 5 times 1, which is 5, and 4 times 3, which is 12. So actually our answer is a proper fraction, so I don't need to worry about changing it. Real quick though, I'm going to check if it is simplified. So I'm going to look at my smaller number. I have 5, and I'm think about what can I divide by 5. So I know I can divide 5 by 1, and I can divide 5 by 5. So I then look at my other number, and I don't really care about the number 1, so I'm just going to think about, can I divide 12 by 5? I can't do that, so 5/12 is my final answer then. All right, we are almost done with this lesson, so we have 2 more problems, and for this next problem, we're going to be doing 8 times 2/10. And for this problem, I want you to remember what is underneath this whole number right here. So remember, we technically have this invisible number 1 that's underneath this whole number right here. So when I go to multiply this, I just want my whole number to be multiplied by this numerator right here. So I do 8 times 2. 8 times 2 gives me 16. And then 1 times 10 gives me 10. So I have 16/10 as my final answer. Remember, I don't like 16/10 as my final answer because that is an improper fraction. So I'm going to do those 2 ways again to show you how we can change this into a mixed number. So I'm going to create 10/10 because I want that whole number using my denominator. And then I add 6/10 to that because that would be my leftover. And then 10/10 becomes 1. And then 6/10 would be left over. And we'll talk about simplifying that in a bit. Then if I wanted to do a standard algorithm, I could do 16 divided by 10. And that would look like this, 16 divided by 10. I know that 10 could go into 16 one time. 10 times 1 is 10. 16 minus 10 is 6. And then I would write my answer as a mixed number. So I have a remainder of 6, so that's my numerator, and a denominator of 10, so that would be my denominator. So either way, 1 6/10 is my answer. Whichever way works best for you, that's what you can do. And when we get our final answer of 1 6/10, I'm going to write that over here. When I get that answer, my whole number is fine, but when I take a look at my 6 and my 10, I'm going to think about, let's look at the smaller number. What can I divide 6 by? Well, I can divide 6 by 1, 2, 3, and 6. So then I look at my number 10 and I think about, well, can I divide 10 by any of those numbers? I can't divide 10 by 3 or 6, but I can divide it by 2. So I'm going to divide 6 and 10 by 2. And the reason why we're doing this is because if you can ever divide both of your numbers by something other than the number 1, then that means that you can simplify. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my final answer for this one is 1 3/5. All right, we're almost done now. We have one last problem, and for this last problem, we are going to be multiplying two mixed numbers. So maybe you know what this means. So we have 2 1/3 multiplied by 1 1/2. And for this problem, we're going to have to change both of these numbers into improper fractions. So for this one, we're going to do 2 times 3, which gives me 6, and then 6 plus 1, which is 7. So I'm going to have 7/3 times, then I do 1 times 2, which is 2, and 2 plus 1, which is 3, and leave that denominator of 2. So I'm going to multiply by 7/3 times 3/2. So remember, just like before, we go straight across. So we do 7 times 3, which is 21, and then 3 times 2, which is 6. Now this is going to be a tricky one, because if I were to go like this to try and create that mixed number, I would have 15/6 left. So you would have to then write this as 18/6 with 3/6 left over. But this might be a tricky step for you, so we're actually going to use our standard algorithm to help us solve this one. So to do that, we're going to look at this improper fraction as a division problem. So we have 21 divided by 6. So we're going to do 21 divided by 6, and I have to think about, okay, well, how many times can I skip count by 6? That would get me close to 21, so I can do 6, 12, 18. If I keep counting, I would go over, so we're going to stop right there. So I skip counted 3 times, so I'm going to put that 3 up here, and then I do 6 times 3, because we did our division step, now we're doing our multiply step. 6 times 3 is 18. Now I do my subtraction step. This 1 is going to become an 11, because it borrows from this 10 over here, and that becomes a 1. 11 minus 8 is 3. 1 minus 1 is 0. And then I have to write my final answer. So my remainder becomes my numerator, and my denominator is 6. So my final answer for this problem is going to be 3 3/6. But remember, we always want to check if we can simplify it. So I take a look at my smaller number, the number 3, and I think about what can I divide 3 by. I can divide 3 by 1 and by 3. So then I take a look at my number 6. I think about, can I divide 6 by 3? I definitely can. So we're going to do 3 divided by 3 and 6 divided by 3. So my 3 wholes will stay the same, but 3 divided by 3 gives me 1, and 6 divided by 3 gives me 2, which finally gives me my answer of 3 1/2, and that is that. So most of these steps you already know how to do, like looking at your fractions as division problems, or just multiplying straight across, or just changing your mixed numbers into improper fractions. So you know how to do most of these things. Now all you're doing is just that multiplication step. So make sure you practice those facts so that you can continue doing really well on this, and let me know if you need any help as you try your U-Try problems. Good luck today, 5th grade, and good job!